I'm often faced with the question of whether I am a freedom fighter, particularly after authoring a book on our liberation war.
এই যুদ্ধে রাজনৈতিক নেতৃত্ব যে অপরিহার্য ছিল সেটি সম্পর্কে তিনি আমাদেরকে জানিয়েছেন।
বইটিকে আমি একটি বিশেষ সংযোজন বলছি মুক্তিযুদ্ধের ইতিহাস চর্চার ক্ষেত্রে।
এটা হলো প্রথমবার যেখানে এন্টায়ার হোলিস্টিক মুক্তিযুদ্ধের আলোচনা হয়েছে।
But during the war, I was only 7 years old. I lived in West Pakistan, and therefore I had no chance of becoming a freedom fighter. I would rather say a non-freedom fighter has a much better chance of doing a more dispassionate work on our war, and that's a necessity to get over the historical amnesia that gripped us for a very long period of time. A non-freedom fighter can look at various war events based on information and evidence without any prejudices. What one needs are an opportunity and a strong passion. Of course, one needs certain degree of writing skill, and that's a must. Assalamu alaikum viewers, this is General Sarwar. You are watching Sarwar's Chronicle. You must have been intrigued by the title. There are certain things problematic or disastrous, and eventually turns out to be a good fortune, is usually known as blessing in disguise. Yes, like many, I had won in my career, and that's what I'm going to share today. And I thought it's very much contextual considering the content of this channel. It was in the year 2000. I was a major with 14 years of service. Completed my tenure as Grade 2 Staff Officer, serving at the Divisional Headquarters for 4 years, looking after the training and operational matters. That was the largest formation situated in the southwestern part of Bangladesh, comprising 21 districts out of total 64. So whenever there were any emergencies or natural calamities or requirement of deployment of troops in power station or in the Hossain project, this formation would always have the larger task to perform. After all those heady days, finally I received my posting order on completion of my successful tenure in the divisional headquarters, and I was busy packing up my belongings and the family to move to Dhaka, my new place of posting. So I didn't feel like leaving the old office and colleagues in one hand, and on the other, the fast-paced Dhaka city, its hustle and bustle, and its creating spirits were strongly tempting me. Amidst such temptation and anxieties, the General Officer Commanding one day asked me to accompany him during his visit to Meherpur Mango Group, where the cabinet of the first Bangladesh government took oath on 17th April 1971. So that was a hectic day, not for the long haul, rather more for the General's intermittent bullying. Because of the nature of the profession, we generally get used to such things, but I was very uncomfortable on that particular day and found a reason to pack up earlier than I planned. So on return, while taking leave from the General, I humbly submitted that, sir, I've already received my posting order and taken necessary preparations. If you kindly give a nod. What the General had in mind, I never knew. So after taking a pause without any starter, he just said me, write a paper on the liberation war in Jashur area and then move to Dhaka. I fell from the sky. Regrettably, in the army I had already become a major with 14 years of service, but knew little about Bangladesh liberation war. Even during my school days and college days, including my brief career in the military, I never found any comprehensive curriculum which could educate me on the liberation war and also fulfill my quest of learning 1971. You will find thousands of publications in the market, but none of war is written in a way that after reading which one would understand how our ancestors fought and sacrificed their life to earn the costliest freedom. However, I collected all the available books from the local military library Meanwhile, an admired senior, he came forward. He helped me in organizing the outline of the plan. So it took about 170 hours to complete the paper. Then, really duly wrapped up by spiral binding, I handed over the paper to the general and then moved for Dhaka, my new place of posting. So after joining in Dhaka, particularly 60 days Bengal Regiment, I got busy as usual. There were scarcity of accommodations where to stay in the officers' mess with my family. I still remember, sometimes we needed 2 weeks to get a transport for personal use. Life wasn't as rosy as it seemed to be from the other end of the river. Within a short time, whatever little writing skill I had, the commanding officer was very impressed. So he got a sigh of relief that he has someone who would look after the writing issues and also the brainstorming issues. So practically I remained responsible for writing all the operational briefs, training instructions, study periods, army headquarters project study periods, exercise papers and so on. We had a wonderful array of officers, each looking after different issues. Like the one with BMA adjutant background, he looked after all the ceremonial duties because Dhaka being the hub of visits by the BVIPs and dignitaries. Other cultural-minded officers, he looked after all the cultural events like club nights, social evenings, cultural programs, ladies club, Priti Bhoj, which is also known as Bado Khana, drawn from Urdu word Bada Khana, meaning special meal arranged for all ranks, particularly on national days and also on various festivals. One day while in Priti Bhoj, the adjutant came running and whispered in my ear and requested me to write a paper to be submitted to the brigade headquarters. But it was difficult to write a paper in such short notice. So what I did is I just submitted the Liberation War in Jashore area that I submitted to the general in my previous office. I had no expectation whatsoever, but after a couple of months, someone from the editorial board at the army headquarters contacted me that my article has been selected by the Chief of Army Staff and it needs to be tailored. Late General Musafizur Rahman Bir Bikram was the chief then. He was a valiant freedom fighter, fled from Dhaka to join Jashore area to fight in the Liberation War. Anyway, before the Armed Forces Day of 2000, I got a magazine where my article appearing on the top. I got an appreciation letter from the Principal Staff Officer and also an honorarium. So this sudden flare of joy took me far, not only in terms of time and space, but also in my pursuit of knowledge about 1971 war. Around the same time, the Bijoy Ketan Liberation War Museum was in the offing at the Staff Road, Dhaka Cantonment. It was the old-time Signal Officers' Mess situated on the opposite side of Dhaka Central Library, where the trial of Agartala conspiracy case took place, one of the integral part of our golden history. General Musafiz took a lot of initiative in implementing this museum project. There were about 30 plus officers attached from various units and installations to work as associate researchers under few retired senior and military officers who were themselves freedom fighters. Of them, General Jibon Khan Aidash and Major Kamrul Hassan Bhuya were noteworthy. Somebody brought my recently published article to their knowledge and they immediately contacted my unit and got me on board for the research work, considering I have adequate background knowledge on the subject, which I truly lacked. Research is usually a process of scientifically synthesizing from a vast pool of information into some comprehensively understandable concept, theories and ideas. I'm not sure how much we could do it in the project, but what we practically did is we wrote various narratives, interviewed the freedom fighters, then integrated various sketch documents, statements, relics, and finally we analyzed the events independently. Then these were printed on modern boards for public viewing. During my research, I also had an access to rarest of the sources of information, like meeting the frontline fighters, meeting the sector commanders, sub-sector commanders. I've used documents from Bangladesh Forces Headquarters. Those were unclassified though. Then I've written presses and pamphlets used by Greenwich Naval Staff College, UK. I've used Anderson papers. I had a lot of US congressional records on the proceeding of Bangladesh Liberation War. I used various books written by the freedom fighters. I had in my own collection the books written by the Indian writers, Pakistani writers, including few Western writers. Then also I used the documents, 15 volume documents edited by Hassan Hafizur Rahman that had in my personal collection some of the diplomats' materials that they were gathering during the war. Also used freedom fighters' diaries. So much so about these sources of information. But my personal feeling is that the more I read about 1971 war, the rape and genocide seemed much more stronger rhetoric in the political and literary space than the achievement by the frontline fighters. But nation states do not win war by only considering rapes and genocides. For winning a war, you got to fight out your enemies, and our freedom fighters did most of it. Unfortunately, it has not been reflected in the history, literature, or in the cultural space. The central idea of this museum is to bring forth those thrilling and bone-chilling sagas of our freedom fighter in the light so that the newer generation can know about their achievement, which had long been trivialized. After the relentless effort of many men and officers, the museum came into being. Honorable Prime Minister inaugurated this museum on 21st November 2000. After the inaugural ceremony, the museum was awaiting government approval, and therefore an ad hoc committee, they had to run the museum during the interim period. And during that time, General Jibon Kanaidas, he thought I had the right makeup for the job, so I was retained there for another year and a plus. Not much job, just carrying out outreach programs, briefing the dignitaries, and sometime joining in the meetings called by Bangladesh Liberation War Affairs Ministry, and also running the daily administration of the museum. In the ministerial meeting, I was to make a useful contribution, for which I was co-opted to a national history writing committee with some senior citizens, but unfortunately I couldn't work on that project. However, one day while I was working in the museum, suddenly a delegation of senior officers, they came from National Defence College, and they were in a hurry, and at times quite diffidently asked me to help them out with some information on Bangladesh Liberation War, like the growth of Bangladesh forces, relative strength, operational strategy, the irregular forces, lessons, allied offensive, and many more. So I took hardly any time to trace those out from 7 to 8 different books and kept those aside for them to be taken later on. But besides my personal fascination for 1971, what stuck in my mind is, after so many years of our independence, we couldn't write a reference book for professional studies for our officers. That I was really disheartened by this fact. So I thought of writing one, but how to start? So I even started translating a Bengali one into English one. So while discussing the matter with one of my course mates, General Mushfiqur Rahman, he said that you should be doing a PhD specializing on a particular subject, not just writing a book like this, but that is going to be an ordinary one. I recall with gratitude the level of forward thinking he had at that stage of our career. So as discussed, so I took permission from Army headquarters. And then I went to Dhaka University with my proposal, which was not a proposal really. That was a synopsis of a military history book on our liberation war. Usually, research on a scientific issue is based on hypothesis, or you go to prove or disprove something. Since history is a social science issue, where a researcher needs to answer to few specific queries to complete his research. But mine was different. I have gone to Dhaka University with a synopsis of a military history book, and I remained stayed firm on my proposal, and I asked them that you should be awarding me with a PhD for the book I am destined to write. So Dhaka University generously agreed to my proposal and accepted me to register as a PhD student, since nobody before undertook this project.
৭১ নিয়ে কি এতটুকু কলেবরে সম্ভব নাকি আরও কাজ করার আছে, এই পুরো ব্যাপারটা, প্লাস আপনি কেন লিখলেন, কতটা সময় লাগলো, একটু যদি আমাদেরকে এই পুরো ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডটা একটু বলেন তরুণদের দিকে।
ধন্যবাদ সুখন। আসলে একটা 550 পৃষ্ঠার বই লিখতে আসলেই অনেক সময় লাগে। এটা হয়তো 2-4 দিন, 10 দিন, 1 বছর, 2 বছরের কাজ না। এর চিন্তা চেতনার প্রসার বেশ অনেক আগে থেকেই। ইনফ্যাক্ট আমিও আজকে এখানে তোমাদের সবাইকে যাদেরকে ডাকলাম, আমি বেসিক্যালি তোমরা সবাই তরুণদের নিয়ে কাজ করো। তো আমার কাছে মনে হয়েছে যে এই মুক্তিযুদ্ধভিত্তিক এই ইতিহাসের বইটি তরুণদের কাছে সবচেয়ে আগে যাওয়া দরকার। এটার একটা কারণ হলো যে তরুণরা আমাদের টোটাল জনগোষ্ঠীর মধ্যে সবচেয়ে একটা সেন্সিটিভ একটা অংশ। অর্থাৎ এদের একটা প্রতিভা আছে, এদের ইচ্ছা আছে, অদম্য শক্তি আছে।
So I started my research with late Professor K.M. Hossain. Then I got Dr. Sayyid Anwar Hossain as my second guide. He's a very known face in the intellectual circle, including Bangladesh University of Professionals, National Defence College, and Defence Services Command and Staff College, arena. The journey was extremely tough, not a never-ending time. To cut the long story short, the year when I registered for PhD and the day I received my doctoral degree, I did so many things. To include, I did a United Nations mission in Africa as a major. Then my small daughter, 4 years daughter, she reached her adulthood and went on to become an Air Force officer, completed her 2 years training in Bangladesh Air Force Academy. My son took bath, he passed SSC. I did 3 major posting in Chittagong Hill Tracks as a major, Lieutenant Colonel and Brigadier General. I did a higher defense management course in India. I did National Defense College in Dhaka. Last but not the least, I became a general. This was a tremendous flight. Despite moments of worries and dilemmas, I never abandoned my project. I wasn't lucky enough to be a freedom fighter myself, but I am enjoying the freedom to the fullest at the expense of their blood and lives. So the least I could do is to tell their tale to those who are ignorant of our glorious past. The pride, realization and commitment to writing this book came through that small piece of paper writing that seemed to be a punishment then, but eventually came out to be a huge blessings for me. Otherwise, never would have my article been published in the magazine, none would have noticed, none would have called me to integrate with the museum project that opened the vistas of carrying out research and eventually publishing a book on our liberation war. My thanks and gratitude to my guides, family members, friends, colleagues and publishers, and last but not the least, Bangladesh Army for providing me such a unique opportunity and also support throughout my research. So here I end. Thanks for watching. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.